Hey gang, and welcome back. These videos are brought to you by Card Conduit, the best place to sell your unused collection fast and easily. 401 Games, Canada's top shop for all your hobby and TCG needs. Dragon Shield, the strongest sleeves for your strongest decks. And Moxfield, the easiest way to store and share your deck lists. Corwin wins the die roll and starts us off. He draws, plays a mountain, and passes. Maximus just has an island and ships it to me. My turn has a tap Prairie Stream coming in, and I pass after that. Fred draws, plays a forest, and casts Wild Growth and puts it onto the forest. Corwin's turn has an unclaimed territory, naming Dragon, and he pays 2 for a Felwar Stone. Maximus draws, plays another island, and passes. I've got a Skycloud Expanse, and I then cast a Soul Ring. With the floating white, I then play Enlightened Tutor, going to find a land tax and put it on top before passing. Fred plays a Plains and casts a Verduran Enchantress, passing after it resolves. Corwin's got a mountain and is able to cast a reduced costing Terror of the Peaks and passes. Max's turn has Riptide Laboratory coming in, and he pays 3 for a Rhystic Study. I draw and cast Land Tax, paying the 1, and then play out Ledger Shredder because I don't know how to sequence well. I then pass after having missed the value. Fred's got an island, and he pays 1 white for an Authority of the Consuls, paying the 1 for the Rhystic Study cost. He then plays a Utopia Sprawl, also paying for the tax, but triggers my Ledger Shredder. I resolve the ability, and after that, Fred passes. Corwin's turn has Exotic Orchard coming in, and he goes straight to combat, swinging the Terror at Fred for 5, who takes the hit. In his post-combat main phase, Corwin then casts a Scourge of the Throne, and as it comes in, deals the 5 from the Terror trigger to Max's face. Max plays an island, and then casts a Mocking Sprite and ships it to me. I go and find 3 basics from Land Tax, and then draw for turn. I play an island, and then cast Niko, paying the 1, and passing. Fred draws and plays a forest, and then brings out Dueling Ground to slow everyone down, and pays the 1. He then plays a Noble Hierarch, also paying for the study cost, and passing after that. Corwin plays a Command Tower, and then casts Karlach. He then goes to combat, and swings the Scourge of the Throne at me, which gets him a Dethrone trigger, and nets him an extra combat step. I take the hit, and he untaps his dragon, and moving to his second combat step, he swings the Scourge at Fred. Fred then takes the hit, and moving to his third combat step, he hits Fred again. We then move to his second main phase, and remember the Terror trigger, which Corwin puts onto Niko, and he passes after that. Max draws, plays an island, and casts a Strata Scythe. He then foretells a card, and passes to me. My turn has an island coming in, and I cast Dream Trawler, which is an all-star in Niko, and I pass after that. Fred plays a forest, and then brings out Angus. He follows up his commander by casting Sterling Grove, and then a Fertile Ground. He passes after that. Corwin's land for turn is an Arcane Lighthouse, and he then casts a Dragon Speaker's Servant, dealing 1 damage to the Mocking Sprite with the Terror of the Peaks trigger. For combat, Corwin then swings the Scourge of the Throne at Max for 6, and gets to untap it with Karlach's ability. His second combat step then has him swinging at me for 6 as well, and Max and I both take our hits. Corwin then passes turn. Max's turn has a Reliquary Tower coming in, and he casts Curse of the Swine, putting 4 into the X, and exiling all of Corwin's board. This does have Max losing 3 life from the Terror, and Corwin also casts Reiterate, getting his own copy, and targeting everything else except for Angus. With the targets on the stack though, I then discard a Plains to make Dream Trawler hexproof, and the creatures are then exiled and people make some boars. Max then passes to me. Once more I get 3 lands from my land tax trigger and draw for turn. I then play a Plains and swing the Dream Trawler at Corwin. He takes 5 and I gain 5 after it gets pumped by swinging. In my second main phase, I then cast Sun Titan, paying the 1, and as it enters, bring back a Plains from my graveyard. Fred just draws and plays a Blessed Sanctuary. Corwin draws for turn, but with Dueling Grounds meaning he can only attack with 1 boar and his dragon's mostly gone, he decides to just pass. Max's turn has him playing an island and casting an Archmage Emeritus. He then casts Sword of the Animist and passes after it resolves. I play Hall of Heliod's Generosity and then impend an Overlord of the Flood Pits, drawing 2 and discarding 1. I then cast a Bident of Thassa. Going to combat, I swing the Dream Trawler at Fred, drawing a card, and he casts Moment's Peace to fog it, paying the 1 for the study trigger. After that, I downtick my Overlord in my end step, and I pass to Fred. Fred just draws, and resolves an Avacyn, and ships the turn to Corwin. Corwin's main phase has a coveted jewel coming in, and he pays the 1 for the Rhystic study cost. He draws 3, and then plays a mountain for turn. He then casts a Goldspan Dragon. Max has got an island, he then makes a deal to get the coveted jewel from Corwin, and suits up the Archmage Emeritus with the Sword of the Animist, and swings him at Corwin. On attack, Max gets to go find an island, and Corwin then takes 3, and Max gets the jewel, and then casts Talrand, and passes. My turn has a Serra Sanctum coming in, and I recast Niko. I then go to combat, and Max reciprocates his generosity with the jewel, so I send a board him for 2. He takes the hit, and I get to draw 3 as I take the jewel. I then cast Propaganda, as well as Prop Room, and pass the turn after that. Fred's got an untapped Prairie Stream coming in, and moving to combat, he swings Avacyn at me, but I chump with the Dream Trawler. After combat, Fred casts Defense of the Heart, and passes once his enchantment resolves. Corwin's turn has him drawing, and swinging a boar at me, paying the 2 for Propaganda, and I let it go through, taking the 2, and he gets the jewel. He then plays a mountain for turn, and casts a Kilnmouth Dragon, revealing Balefire Dragon from his hand to give it 3+1/+1 counters. He then casts the Balefire Dragon, and passes. During his end step, Max flashes in an Aboleth Spawn. Max's turn has an island coming in, and he follows up with a Gilded Lotus. He then plays a Tidal Barracuda, and he goes to combat. Once more the Archmage goes at Corwin, getting to find an island, and Corwin then takes 3. This has Max getting the jewel, and drawing 3, and then passing turn. I play an island and cast Faithful Mending, drawing 2, discarding 2, and gaining 2. I then go to combat, and poke Max for 2 to take the jewel. Before moving to blocks though, Max uses the jewel to flash in a Wavebreaker Hippocamp, and he then takes the hit and loses it. After combat, I cast a Soltari Visionary, and pass. Fred gets to sacrifice Defense of the Heart during his upkeep, and goes to find a Destiny Spinner and a Seedborn Muse. He then draws for turn, playing Rejuvenating Springs as his land drop, and then casts a Luminarch Ascension. Going to combat, Fred swings Avacyn at me. I flash in Restoration Angel to flicker Niko. With the flicker trigger on the stack, I activate Niko to flicker the Restoration Angel, and make all of my shard copies into angels. I then chump Avacyn with one of the shards. Niko then re-enters, giving me 2 more shards, and Max gets 2 shards from the Aboleth Spawn scene that come in as well. In his post-combat main phase, Fred then casts Estrid's Invocation, and has it come in as a copy of Luminarch Ascension. He then passes, with my Restoration Angel coming in at the end of turn, and flickering Niko to make 2 more shards, which Max gets to make as well. Corwin's turn has him going to combat as soon as he draws, and he swings a boar at me to take the jewel. He then casts a Howling Mine, and follows up with one of my favorite cards, Descent into Avernus. He then passes, and during his end step, Max casts his Foretold Raven form to exile Abyssin during his end step. Max draws and casts a Shifting Grift, exchanging control of Angus and my boar. He then plays Rogue's Passage for turn, and he moves the Strata Scythe onto the Aboleth spawn, and he goes to combat. He then makes the Aboleth spawn unblockable with the Rogue's Passage, hitting Fred for 15. He then passes, and during his end step, I sacrifice 3 shards, scrying 1, and then drawing 1, 3 times in a row. My main phase has me casting a Hedron Crab, and I then play Sea of Clouds and mill Corwin for 3. I then cast a Thought Vessel, and then a Sublime Archangel, and I go to combat. I swing the Soltari Visionary at Corwin, and in response to the Exalted triggers, Corwin activates Killing-Mouth Dragon to burn it down. With the target on the stack, I flicker it with Niko to save it, and then pass and get it during my end step as we move to Fred's turn. Fred draws, plays a Plains, and goes to combat. He swings a boar at Corwin to try and get a jewel, but Corwin wants to hang on to it, blocking with his Balefire Dragon. After that, Fred passes. Corwin's Descent into Avernus ticks up on his upkeep, dealing 2 and making everyone 2 treasures. He then draws for turn, and cracks 2 treasures to help cast the Dragon. Going to combat, he swings the Balefire Dragon at Fred, and draws off the Dragon. This allows him to put Zerolin of the Claw into play as well. Fred then takes 6, but the Blessed Sanctuary protects his creatures from the Balefire Dragon trigger. After combat, Corwin then plays a Treasure Vault and passes. During the end step, Max flashes in Battle of Segovia and has Fred defend it. Max draws, plays an island, and moves the Strata Scythe onto Talrand. With that on the stack, Corwin responds by activating Killing-Mouth Dragon to burn him, but Max responds to that with Slip Out the Back to save his commander. Max then pays to move the Scythe onto the Barracuda, and then makes it unblockable before swinging at Corwin. Corwin takes the hit and drops to 10, and Max passes. I go to find 3 lands from land tax, and then draw for turn. I go to combat, and swing the Soltari Visionary at Fred, and he attempts to fog it with a Flashback Moment's Peace. I in turn use an Offer You Can't Refuse to counter it though, and Corwin jumps in by activating the Arcane Lighthouse to remove Fred's Shroud. I then use a Visionary to destroy the Dueling Grounds, and Fred also cracks Sterling Grove to go and find War Tax. After combat, I activate Niko and target the Restoration Angel, exiling it, and as it comes back during my end step, I flicker Niko to make 2 more shard tokens. Fred just draws, plays a Breeding Pool untapped, and then casts War Tax. With that on the stack, Max responds with a Commandeer and gains control of the spell, and therefore the War Tax, and Fred passes. Corwin's Descent ticks up again, dealing 4 and making 4 treasure tokens. He then activates Zerolin to go and find a Twin Flame Tyrant, and he goes to combat. He swings a boar token at Max to get the Jeweled Lotus, and sends the rest of the dragons and boars at Fred. This also triggers the Dragon, drawing Corwin 4 cards. He also gets to put an Udvara Hellkite into play off the trigger as well. Fred casts Holy Day in response, which Corwin tries to counter with Tybalt's Trickery. This has Fred hitting Enchanted Evening off the triggery after it resolves, and after doing the math, Corwin sees that he's only dealing 28 damage to Fred total. To take him out, Corwin then casts an Electro Dominance, putting 4 into the X and targeting me. And then plays a free Electro Duplicate to make a copy of Twin Flame Dragon to try and deal even more damage. I respond to this with Fourth of Negation, countering the Electro Duplicate, and Fred decides to chump one of the dragons with his bird token. After combat, Corwin casts a Soul Ring, and then casts Wheel of Fortune. I respond by tapping Sarah's Sanctum for a ton of mana thanks to Enchanted Evening making everything on my board into an enchantment, and I flash in Hammers of Moradin, which has Corwin respond by casting a Final Fortune in response. I'm not done though since everything is flashed because of Max, and I flash out an Ancient Gold Dragon. Once it resolves, but before the wheel resolves, Max then casts Submerge and puts the Ancient Gold Dragon on top. Max then also plays a Wrong Turn to give Dragon to Fred, and we then wheel our hands. When Corwin then goes to change the phases, I re-flash out my Ancient Gold Dragon, and then my Sphere of Safety. But Fred responds with a counterspell on my Sphere. I in turn cast Supreme Will to look at my top 4, and find Dovin's Veto to counter the counterspell, and Corwin then moves to his second main phase. He plays a mountain, and after all that, Corwin goes to his extra turn, unfortunately getting taken out by his own Descent trigger, which deals 6 to us and makes us each 6 treasures. He also decides to tap the Kilnmouth Dragon to deal 3 to me on his way out. Max draws and overloads a Bluster Squall. He then plays an island for turn and casts Leer. He then plays a Mists of Lorien to bounce all 5 mana permanents. With the ability on the stack, Max then casts Gather Specimens from his graveyard before he loses Leer, and Fred responds to this by making 12 Angels off the Luminarch Ascension. Max responds by casting Sink into Stupor to bounce my Propaganda, and then once all it's resolved, plays Favorable Winds to pump all of his Drakes. He's then able to win through combat and win the game. Game review time. This grueling game was just shy of 2 hours, sitting at 1 hour and 58 minutes. It was an incredibly long one, and yeah, I think Dueling Grounds is probably the MVP of this game, as it slowed everything down. It made all of the aggressive decks that much slower, like mine and Corwin's, and it allowed Fred and Max to slowly build up their resources. I'm not sure why, but I thought I had to use Angus Mackenzie's ability in combat, although if you read the Gatherer, that's not entirely true, as you just have to use it before combat damage. I think by this point in the game, my brain was so fogged over, and I just wanted to move on to the next one that I must have missed it. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, but it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.